Hello, everybody. Today we have William Seymour. We know him as Bill. He's a proud member of Church Farm School class of 1978, when he then went on to study at Gettysburg College, graduating with a degree in history in 1978. Bill has enjoyed an unplanned, fruitful, and rewarding career in business. Following a series of successful sales and marketing positions, he launched his own software firm in 1995, selling the company to an industry-leading firm 10 years later. Bill is currently the owner of Pearl Works, a firm that specializes in providing inlay services to some of the best-known names in the guitar business. Bill has remained actively involved and supportive of Church Farm ever since he's graduated. He previously served on the CFS Board of Trustees and was for a period of time employed as Director of Development here at CFS. Thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I know it's alumni weekend here, so I won't take up too much of your time. I just have a couple of questions. And the first one here is, you are an alum of CFS, again, from the class of 78. You're also Headmaster's Watch winner. For those of you who do not know, the Headmaster's Watch is a unique token of the school's gratitude and admiration for that student whose particular character, ability, maturity, moral authority, spiritual balance, leadership, and overall contributions to the school have made an enduring and lasting impact on the entire community. That is a long explanation of what that is. I just wanted to know if you could tell us a little bit about how you found CFS, what it was like back then, and what it meant to receive the watch.
Yeah, certainly. I'm the youngest of 6 children. Never knew my dad. My mother left with the 6 of us shortly after I was born in Detroit, and we relocated to New York. My mother was an extremely well-educated woman. She expected the same from all her children. I was a proverbial mistake. While all my siblings were largely 1 year apart from one another, I don't think I was necessarily planned. There was a 5-year gap between my closest sibling and then my mother left with us. But I'm so thankful that she did. And along the way, I got to see my brothers and sisters take various detours on their own way onto successful careers, whether that was Paris Island or Woodstock or hitchhiking across the country. I wanted something a little more linear. I was a good student. I wasn't the best. I was a good athlete. I wasn't the best. I was in a big public high school. I knew enough from my mom talking about private schools that that's where you could find the best educations. And so I started every free period when I was in 7th grade looking through the Barron's guides of private schools. And of course, they were all out of reach financially. I came upon the Church Farm School, and it was appealing in every single way. About 150 students, 7 through 12, exclusively boarding, a working dairy farm, pigs. You were expected to work, you were expected to attend church, you were expected to be on an athletic team, and you were going to be in class working hard as well. And why that appealed to me as a 12-year-old, I'm not entirely sure. People say to you, how do you find your way here to Church Farm? It was kind of meant to be, is how I feel. But when I came home excitedly as a 12-year-old and told my mother about this school that I discovered, which at the very end of the promotion said, room, board, and tuition, $700. I thought to myself, could my mother even feed me at home for that? And so I presented it to her, and she looked at it with the work program and all the other mandated requirements and said, why would I send you to a reform school? You're doing just fine where you are. And that was that. 2 years later, on the first day of 9th grade, a young man arrived at our playground, first day of class, and he was he looked like an outsider. And New Yorkers can be quite cruel. And my mother always told me, befriend the newcomer, it'll be you someday. And so on the first day of school, we had a recess and we went outside and began kicking a ball around. I said, where'd you come from, John? And he proceeds to tell me about a little school in Pennsylvania that I never heard of. And lo and behold, it was the Church Farm School. I invited him over to my house. I told him not to talk about the school he came from. He was an absolute gentleman. He stood up when my mother entered the room. He pulled her chair out. He'd read a few books. When he left at the end of that evening, she said, that young man is welcome here anytime he's like. And being the young salesman in training that I was at that time, I turned to her and said, guess where that young man went to school? I came up to school about 2 weeks later. I met Mr. Kistler, Dr. Schreiner, took my admissions test, and suddenly it was my mother's idea that I should go here.
Right.
And life just got better instantly, and I'm just so grateful for it. I arrived here 50 years ago as a 10th grader. Not a day too soon, but fortunately not too late.
Now, talk about kismet there and the universe aligning. I mean, what are the odds of something like that happening?
Exactly. 150 kids, small town in Long Island, my class. It's crazy. That's why when people say, wow, that's really a great coincidence, serendipity, or no, it was meant to be.
That's destiny.
Yeah, thank you.
No, yes, no, there's no mistaking that. I mean, that's an amazing story, and yeah, that's, I mean, for that kind of price and to be able to come here and have that kind of opportunity, and you arrived in 10th grade, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, you're a newcomer to the school then too, because you haven't been there from the opening years.
Yes.
And stuff. Wow, that's really impressive. And now, just fast forwarding a bit, you have stayed consistently involved with CFS for decades. At one point, again, coming back to campus as a director of development, you've seen a lot of change over the years, for sure. And what would you? Can you give us some idea of what you think has changed?
Well, clearly, the first thing that anybody who may have had the privilege of coming here in the early to mid 70s, the physical plant is just entirely so much more inviting and agreeable to a far more current and modern education. I'm not apologizing for what was afforded me. I loved it. I thought the world of it, but it was pretty rustic. Let's just say that. So the physical plant, while I love that the grounds have been preserved and some of the old barns and buildings have been preserved, I think that's critically important. But yeah, the cottages are far more inviting, the academic buildings, the athletic facilities. And so in the same way, I'd be pleased for my son to enjoy an experience that might be a bit more elevated than the one I had. All the physical plant improvements appealed to me, and I see their value, and I'm grateful to the donors who've made that possible, and I'm grateful to the brilliance of Reverend Schreiner, who had a vision and the ability clearly to be able to make that come true. But really for me, it's all about relationships. And so I come back and yeah, I see all the pretty landscaping and the buildings, and I love all that, but I'm still interested in the educators. Is this a calling to you? I'm interested in the students. Can I relate to you? Does your story have anything resembling to me? And just still what we're trying to cultivate in the young men who come through here. I'm glad that we haven't abandoned some of the basic elements of what we consider a church farm school education. And so, yeah, lots of things have changed, but for me, it still all boils down to relationships, exceptional educators and individuals dedicating their lives and work to enriching the lives of deserving young men for me, for whom this might otherwise be an entirely out of reach opportunity. So I see change, but I still see the same, and I'm grateful for that, because when I don't recognize it, yeah, this run probably comes to an end, but I don't think that'll happen.
And that's one of the challenges of a school with this kind of history, right? Is you want to reflect and support the history where it comes from, right? But you also need to plan and make things modern to suit the modern educational goals and the students that you're trying to serve. So, how do you straddle both of those worlds? So like you say, when people who have graduated years ago, when they come back, there needs to be some familiarity there. Not everything can change, because then you lose that connection. So trying to keep a foot in both of those worlds and stride forward is a challenge. Yeah. Especially with the increased turnover of faculty and staff here. It makes it harder for people who are coming back to find those connections, which is relationships. Because that is the reason why you come here. And and I look at every time we have an opportunity to have this kind of like a alumni weekend, and the students that I meet and that I realize it was 20 years ago, and they now have careers and kids. And I remember, teaching them and having those connections with them is, that's why you do it.
Yeah.
That's why you're here to begin with, is to have those relationships and keep it up.
And that's why I think Lori McDermott is so critically important to the school. She is so much of the bridge from the past and present and future, I would imagine. And when you think that Lori's relationship extends back to the woman who handed me my $1 a week allowance in 1975 and who for ages answered the phone, Church Farm, the school at CFS.
I remember.
So I think that position as alumni director, and frankly, Lori does so much more than just deal with alums, but that's so vital in my eyes.
All right, a little shout out to Lori. We love you, Lori. And so one thing I think of whenever I hear about you or you're mentioned is the idea of entrepreneurship. I know you are quite the entrepreneur, and I want to know if you could take a minute because I also run the Deck Business Club here for many years. Can you talk about some of those trials and tribulations of entrepreneurship?
Yeah, and I also want to give another shout out. There was a longtime donor board member named Tyler Griffin, who was just an incredible entrepreneur, friends of the founder, Reverend Schreiner and Dr. Schreiner. And Tyler had a great impact upon me while I was both a student and a board member, and then as a director of development. Just a very crazy, successful business career. And yeah, just the most fundamental advice he gave me when I was starting my first business. We sat down over lunch. It was, Billy, the most important thing about being in business is staying in business.
Right.
You can always fix it. You can get that car running a little better as long as the car is still running. But staying in business. And I said, is it simple as that? He goes, no, you're going to find out it's not as simple as that. So I don't know. I think ultimately I've ended up as an entrepreneur because I'm essentially unemployable. I won't negotiate on how I treat people, or I won't cut corners. My ethics are not up for negotiation. And in most every workplace along the way that I've had great opportunities, but ultimately we would grow and behaviors would change, and the way we would look at clients would be different, and colleagues somewhat became a bit more expendable. And I had to run from that. And so I've had a great run of starting a few businesses, burying a couple along the way. I lead the league in bad ideas, but I don't ever stop having ideas. I just considered myself a baseball player that if I'm getting 3 out of 10 right, man, I'm an all-star.
Right.
And a lot of people are afraid to be wrong, which is so critically important to entrepreneurship. Is if you fail harder next time, or at least learn something from it. And so, yeah, I think that it was the resilience that I picked up here at the Milk Squad when you're getting up at 4 a.m. without any adult supervision, but the peers that you're sleeping with overnight in the cottages and crossing the valley and going over on a brutal winter morning and showing up and milking all those cows and feeding them and spreading the manure. Like, that will do something for a work ethic at age 15. And I may not be the smartest guy on the block, but I'll never be outworked. And that was something else that was fundamental in terms of my church farm experience, and it served me well in my business. And yeah, the secret of our business too is creating an environment where you'd want to work. And if you do that and you keep talented people around you and you celebrate them and let them know there's no mistake they're going to make that will ever cost your support, as long as they're trying, you watch the great things that will happen, whether you're a coach of a team, an advisor to a class. Building trust is critical to whatever you do, and it's certainly essential in small business.
That's a fantastic answer. I keep telling the DECA guys, I said it's hard work and failure. Those are the two things. You can't escape hard work, and you can't be afraid to fail because you are. And you have to get up and try again. Too often you hear about the success story, but you don't see the hundreds of not successful stories that went before that.
Yeah.
And so just trying to keep pushing forward in that. And I've always appreciated that about you. Your unrelenting optimism and drive, I've always remembered.
Thank you, Chris.
Even though I don't see you as much as I would like, I remember that. And it helps me move forward on things when I hit obstacles, believe it or not.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. We're getting close on time here, so I don't want to take up too much of your time this weekend. The last question I usually ask everybody here is, do you have any advice for the current and future students of CFS?
I think I was exceptional in the fact that I so badly wanted to be here as a young man and as an adolescent. And I never really wanted to leave, and I never really did. I stayed the summer after I graduated, worked on the farm, went down to the Shriners' home, many weekends down in Cape May, and I'd always been coming back. But I know that for many of the young men who come here, they can't wait to get on with the next chapter of their career, and that's understandable. Academically, maybe they're going into the armed forces, maybe they're going off to serve or volunteer somewhere. What I would say is, don't ever minimize your experience here. You may want to run from it now, but I find at 65, or a couple months shy of my 65th birthday, in most any conversation that gets beyond like the surface level, when somebody wants to get to know me, the one little tidbit or gem that constantly turns heads, that has people say, stop, tell me more about that, is when I say, yeah, I went away to a little school in Pennsylvania with about 150 to 200 other young men from around the country and some from abroad. And I learned a wealth about places and people and cultures and experiences I knew nothing about. And that had nothing to do with all the academic enrichment that I enjoyed. It was just learning people. And whenever I talk about that, and I know that students give up sacrifices. There are no young ladies in the school. They're not going home, most of them, to their bed at night. Yeah, there's limits in the numbers when you're only 150 to 200 kids. I get all that. But if you trust me on one thing, if you are willing to tell your church farm school story in 5 or 10 or 20 years, it's going to be listened to eagerly because it's unique, it stands out, and you should be proud of it. And by telling that story, which was the heart of the CFS Ambassadors Program, if just the people who are fundamentally most touched by what we've been trying to do for all these years, if they tell their story, there's nothing more powerful in terms of a recruiting or admissions related message that might be sent from a satisfied alum. And so be proud of your school, even if right now you can't wait for graduation to come around the corner. You'll understand what I'm telling you one day.
All right, you hear that, everyone? That's enough. We're going to end it right there. All right, that was fantastic. Bill, again, I just want to thank you for taking the time today to come in and say some incredibly supportive, uplifting things. And I hope that we see you more on campus.
Yeah, God bless the Schreiner family.